What happens when international sanctions and tariffs designed to hit Moscow and Beijing end up shaking the lives of young Americans and the nation's largest healthcare program? This story dives into the surprising ripple effects of Trump's push to curb Europe's Russian oil imports and how those economic tremors are being felt at home. Since his return to the political spotlight, Donald Trump has sought to project a tough stance on Russia and China. One of the signature elements of this approach has been an aggressive push on America's allies in Europe to stop buying Russian oil, combined with new tariffs on countries that continue that trade. In theory, the strategy aims to weaken Moscow's revenue streams and punish Beijing for its ongoing support. But sanctions, trade barriers, and energy restrictions don't exist in a vacuum. They affect global supply chains, consumer prices, and, eventually, the daily lives of ordinary Americans, especially the younger generation entering the workforce and the Medicare program that supports tens of millions of older citizens. Trump's messaging to NATO allies and the European Union has been blunt: reduce or eliminate purchases of Russian oil or face economic consequences. By leveraging America's influence over European markets and threatening steep tariffs on non-compliant nations, Trump hopes to cut Russia off from hard currency revenues. This, in turn, is supposed to deprive the Kremlin of funds to sustain its military activities. But oil markets are interconnected. When Europe reduces imports from Russia, global supply tightens. Prices spike not only in Europe, but in the United States as well. For young Americans, especially those already burdened by student loans or entry-level wages, higher fuel and transportation costs add up quickly. Everything from groceries to gig economy deliveries becomes more expensive. Tariffs on goods from China and potentially India or other nations buying Russian energy are a second pillar of Trump's plan. These tariffs aim to penalize countries seen as undermining U.S. strategic goals. Yet tariffs are effectively a tax paid by American importers, which then pass the cost on to consumers. Clothing, electronics, and essential manufactured goods rise in price. For younger Americans who rely heavily on affordable technology and imported essentials, this is another hit to disposable income. Combined with inflationary pressures from energy markets, the tariff strategy can squeeze household budgets and reduce economic mobility. As international tensions escalate, companies rethink supply chains. Some shift production back to the United States, but at higher labor costs. Others cut jobs or delay hiring because of uncertainty. Youth unemployment can rise. Internships and entry-level positions may shrink, and wage growth can stall. The irony is that a foreign policy meant to strengthen America's global position can create domestic friction for the very people who represent the country's future workforce. At first glance, Medicare, a program for Americans 65 and older, might seem far removed from foreign trade disputes, but it depends heavily on the broader U.S. economy. Rising costs of imported medical equipment, pharmaceuticals, and energy used by hospitals can drive up overall healthcare expenditures. When government budgets tighten or inflation drives up service costs, Medicare's financial strain worsens. Furthermore, when younger workers face lower wages or job instability, payroll tax contributions into Medicare's trust funds slow down. This accelerates concerns about the program's long-term solvency. In other words, a tariff imposed on Europe or China today can translate into a funding gap for seniors' health care tomorrow. Trump's supporters argue that these tough measures will pay off by increasing U.S. leverage, restoring manufacturing, and deterring adversaries. Critics counter that the costs to American households and Medicare outweigh the strategic benefits. As the debate intensifies, U.S. youth and retirees find themselves on the same side of an economic equation, bearing the indirect costs of foreign policy muscle flexing. When government programs like Medicare come under pressure, it can create a sense of intergenerational tension. Younger taxpayers may question why they're shouldering higher costs without seeing benefits, while older Americans worry about cuts to their health coverage. The combination of energy price spikes, tariffs, and shrinking public revenues can inflame these debates, shaping the political landscape for years to come. Some economists see opportunities. Pressure on Europe and China could accelerate investment in renewable energy, leading to more domestic jobs and a cleaner energy grid. In the long run, this might stabilize costs and create new industries. Similarly, reshoring certain manufacturing sectors could open higher quality positions for American workers, including young people. But these benefits take time to materialize and may not offset the short-term hardships. For U.S. youth, understanding the global link between foreign policy and domestic economics is crucial. Civic engagement, voting, and advocacy can influence how tariffs, sanctions, and budget priorities are set. On the Medicare side, policymakers may need to explore new funding models, cost control measures, and reforms that insulate the program from international economic swings. Trump's push to curb Europe's Russian oil imports and impose new tariffs on trading partners is more than a foreign policy headline. It's a domestic story about economic cause and effect. Higher energy prices and tariffs trickle down to U.S. households, especially the younger generation just starting out in life. At the same time, these policies strain Medicare, a program that millions of older Americans rely on, by raising healthcare costs and slowing revenue streams. Whether these measures ultimately strengthen America or undermine its social fabric depends on how leaders balance strategic goals with economic realities at home. For U.S. youth and Medicare recipients alike, the stakes could not be higher. Understanding these connections and acting on them is key to shaping a future where national security and social security can coexist.